The mall faded, and the Royal Air Force fly-past concluded a suffocating tensions settled within the fortified walls of Buckingham Palace. To Queen Camilla, the media's was no longer a private quarrel behind closed boardroom doors. It had been laid bare before the entire public and had become the focal point of international scrutiny. All her long-standing efforts to build influence for her own family as a shrewd move to protect the monarchy against criticisms of an overly expanded royal family. Those commentaries felt like knives cutting into Camilla's pride. Standing beneath the brilliant sunshine, hearing the cheers of the public, Camilla's ears rang against the harsh reality. She realized that William's cold decision, praise for the streamlined balcony lineup, was nothing less than a humiliating public verdict aimed squarely at her family. Unable to swallow this bitter pill, the moment she retreated into the administrative quarters behind the scenes. Camilla March's had been blown away in a single morning, and her bitterness began to transform into a deep resentment as she watched the media applaud the iron fist of the Prince of Wales. As the final cheers of the crowd outside walls, William handed the file back to his secretary with a sharp look, ordering that the decision be communicated to the Queen's office that very morning. He knew full well that this act of striking the name was an implicit declaration of war against his stepmother's ambitions to expand her decades fighting to secure her official standing beside the king was deeply wounded. For Camilla, Laura's removal was not merely a procedural matter, but a direct influence, a red line drawn to recalibrate the order of things. The news traveled like an electric current through the corridors, and the reaction from Queen Camilla arrived faster than anticipated. Upon receiving the amended list, her face instantly drained of color, her fingers tightening on the edge of the paper until the corners of the luxurious document crumpled. The pride of a woman who had spent direct humiliation, a slap in the face, to her long-standing efforts to cloak her private children in royal glory under the guise of the Queen's family. Anger welled up, choking her, making her chest heave. She could not accept that her daughter was being treated as an outsider, an uninvited guest ejected the offices of all members of the royal family. The document reaffirmed the absolute and permanent legality of the decree from the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. The legal brief, sealed in crimson royal wax, stood as a definitive declaration that this regulation would continue manipulation, every ounce of anger, and all the privileges she thought she held had completely shattered against the iron will of the Prince of Wales. Any hope of reversing the decision had officially over her. She looked at William, who still stood there, towering like a monarch who had handed down an unalterable judgment. In that exact moment, Queen Camilla understood that every manip to be strictly applied to all future state ceremonies, with no exceptions to be considered. The decree was no longer a forgotten text. It had become a sharpened sword of justice, ready to cleave any personal element from the greater institutional design. Queen Camilla received this news with a hollowed heart. The fury and resentment of the past day closed in utter humiliating defeat. The echoes of the uproar behind the prince's office doors were swiftly buried, but the shift in power it created could not be hidden. A day after the Trooping the Color ceremony, the Royal Legal Council officially issued a top-secret internal memorandum. To the view of the guest list would have been entirely mundane were it not for the sudden appearance of a particular document from the Royal Legal Advisory Team. It was an old decree stamped confidential from the reign of the late Queen Elizabeth II, a document seemingly fading or appearing in state ceremonies unless granted a specific written warrant from the sovereign themselves. This decree was the legal shield left behind by the late Queen, a stern reminder to maintain absolute transparency before the public. Preventing outsiders from exploiting the crown's aura for personal appeared entirely out of place, yet it was positioned in a highly prominent slot. Laura, Queen Camilla's daughter, from her previous marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, was an art curator who generally lived a quiet life but had always enjoyed the unspoken favor of her powerful mother. Gain, or causing public confusion regarding institutional power. William's concentration snapped instantly, his brows furrowing, as his eyes swept over the list of those scheduled to step onto the Buckingham balcony, alongside the King and Queen. Right in the middle of a string of familiar names, the name Laura Lopes covered by the dust of time until it was unearthed to serve top-secret logistical preparations for 2026. Each line of text on the ancient parchment appeared cold but clear. All individuals who were not working members of the royal family and whose relation existed solely through remarriage were strictly forbidden from participating right within the solemn workspace of the palace. Camilla watched in horror as her daughter destroyed the remaining remnants of her aristocratic dignity, yet she was powerless to stop Laura's frenzy. Corridor outside. Pointing her finger repeatedly at William, she accused him of selfishness, of abusing his power to persecute her family, and of deliberately orchestrating a drama to tarnish her mother's public reputation. Laura's unhinged behavior created a scene of unprecedented chaos of being struck from the list, the feeling of isolation throughout the ceremony, and the pride of someone who had long considered herself part of the privileged class twisted into a protocol. William's immobility and refusal to engage acted like a torch thrown into a powder keg that was waiting to explode inside Laura Lopes. It was this cold disregard from the prince that completely shattered the last of Laura's restraint. The humiliation, uncontrollable rage. Laura's face flushed deep red, her muscles trembling violently. Stepping forward, utterly discarding the most basic rules of court etiquette, she began to shout her protests. Her voice, high-pitched and laced with bitterness and resentment, echoed down the from a royal party. In a state of fury and resentment, Camilla immediately took the file to find King Charles III in his private study, hoping for an intervention from the most powerful man in the kingdom. The king, weary and leaning back in his chair under the mixture of helplessness and shock. As the head of the institution, Charles understood better than anyone the weight of a decree left by his own mother. He realized that Camilla stood beside him, her gaze filled with expectation and urgency, awaiting a command to overrule her stepson's decision. Yet the expression on King Charles's face grew darker with every line he read. Instead of the protective anger Camilla had expected, the king's eyes held a mounting pressures of both his health and state affairs, silently took the documents from his wife's hand. The king's silence stretched on, indefinitely punctuated only by the pressured rustle of turning pages. William was not acting impulsively. His son had found a legal foundation so firm it could not be shaken. An intense psychological struggle unfolded within the monarch. On one side, love and the desire to compensate the wife who had accompanied him through many storms. The media and royal experts, the focus of attention did not lie with the fighter jets in the sky. Photojournalists shot continuously, scanning every face in the lineup on the balcony. The distinct, streamlined arrangement of the casts, veteran royal commentators began to offer sharp analyses. They did not hesitate to point out that this was a strategic message, a clear sign that Prince William was tightening the enforcement of traditional rules that had been relaxed over the past few years. The resolve to keep the balcony strictly reserved for the core servants of the nation was praised. This year's ranks immediately triggered the sharp instincts of the press. There was only the King Camilla, the Prince of Wales, and the working members of the family. There was absolutely no sign of any relatives from the Parker Bowles faction. This unusual shift quickly created an undercurrent that rippled across digital media platforms even before the ceremony had concluded. In the press, pen reporters began to whisper, exchanging questioning glances and constantly double-checking the initial provisional lists. Major digital news outlets simultaneously updated their headlines, questioning the absence of the Queen's daughter, turning Trooping the Color from a pure birthday celebration into a subject of deep royal political analysis. On live television broadcasts, on the other, his ultimate duty to the dignity of the crown. Finally, after a heavy sigh, Charles slowly placed the file on the table and shook his head, a silent admission that William was playing a move entirely by the rules, and that the king himself could not use his personal authority, and that all privileges associated with the upcoming Trooping the Color were entirely rescinded. On the other end of the line, Laura's stunned silence before the call disconnected was the surest sign that William's strike had hit the mark, leaving a humiliating sting that began to spread throughout the Parker Bowles family to overturn royal law. The king's shake of the head acted as a final verdict, plunging Camilla into utter shock. The fracture officially tore open when, in another wing of the palace, the royal phone call were sent to Laura Lopes. The royal official performed his duty with perfect decorum, devoid of any superfluous emotion, informing her that her name had been officially removed from the list for state ceremonies. A logistics officer, acting under direct instruction from the prince's office, completed the notification process. A confidential email and a brief, elegant yet cold King Charles III might have brought her a crown, a title, and public deference, but it was absolutely no passport to introduce her own children into the power structure of the monarchy. The appearance of Laura Lopes or anyone else from her former household at state ceremonies, the enforcement of the decree as proof that William was restoring discipline and protecting the core traditional values that the late Queen Elizabeth II had painstakingly preserved for over 70 years. Tremendous public and media support transformed William's had given way to a profound, pervasive bitterness. Looking at the photographs of the Parker Bowles family in civilian attire resting on her dressing table, she understood that a harsh new chapter had truly begun. Her marriage to William's iron-fisted decision became the subject of historic commentary. Analysts and royal experts universally viewed this as a major milestone, a turning point reflecting the decisive governing philosophy of the Prince of Wales. The press spared no praise, hailing the striking of the name and had officially become an impossibility. Camilla was forced to accept the brutal reality that her family faced red lines that could never be crossed, and that the aura of the throne belonged solely to those bearing the weight of institutional service. Meanwhile, across major broadsheets and mainstream media outlets in Britain, Prince William. The silence enveloping the royal legal chambers resembled the atmospheric pressure before a massive storm. Here, the palace's top legal minds had finalized their textual arguments could fuel toxic speculation about hidden power sharing, eroding public trust in the integrity of the monarchy. Refusing to sit back and watch her daughter be humiliated and pushed to the margins, Camilla decided to handle the crisis herself. She proactively sought out William at his Kensington Palace office. As the heavy wooden door closed, the temperature in the room instantly plummeted to freezing. Camilla stood opposite her husband's eldest son. Though she managed to maintain an aristocratic composure, the tense muscles in her face and her shallow that strictly controlling the lineup on the Buckingham balcony was paramount to protecting the transparency of state ceremonies. To the public and the international media, those standing in that position represented the power and duty of the state. Even a single misplaced appearance by an individual with no official duties to prepare for any resistance from the Queen. The decree from the reign of Queen Elizabeth II was no mere scrap of paper. It had been established as a firewall separating public interest from private matters. The lawyers explained in an internal report to be had here, and the late Queen's decree was the supreme law she could not breach. Camilla slowly stepped back, her face momentarily pale. All of Camilla's attempts at manipulation. The Queen realized that neither her tears nor her anger held any power over the man who would inherit the throne. There was no negotiating generations. The royal family was not an ordinary family that could accommodate personal sentiments. Every position beneath the spotlight had to be earned through duty and service to the nation. William's cold, definitive refusal acted as a fortified wall, shutting down, feeling with bitterness and helplessness. The office door closed behind her, leaving Camilla in utter frustration as she realized that her power, after all, met limits it could not cross before the iron will of William. The day of the Trooping the Color ceremony in June 2026 arrived, bringing with it a brilliant yet high-pressure festive atmosphere that blanketed all of London. Amidst this grand setting, Prince William appeared on horseback in full ceremonial mien. What has left the public truly stunned is that after reviewing the legal framework, even King Charles was powerless to overrule the decision of his heir. So what is this secret decree that made William so unyielding, willing to go to war with Camilla's own family? And what really happened? Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, had been officially included. Within hours, a top-secret decree dating back to the reign of Queen Elizabeth II was unearthed, and William immediately ordered Laura's name to be scrubbed from all state ceremonies. The move reportedly left Camilla furious, prompting her to directly demand that William rescind the order, only to be shut down. The situation escalated out of control when Laura allegedly lost her temper, causing a scene inside the palace that forced royal security to intervene.
We need to make it easier for the monarch to just simply strip the titles of people that they don't think are representing them in an appropriate manner.
A bombshell decision handed down just ahead of Trooping the Color 2026 has ignited the most explosive showdown between Prince William and Queen Camilla since the start of the year. While reviewing the ceremonial guest list, William unexpectedly discovered that. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it. Against any trials of the era, beginning with the strict discipline of every minor detail today. After reading the story, do you believe Prince William's resolute enforcement of the decree was an act of cold rigidity or a correct and necessary step to protect the dignity of the royal institution? The morning papers. Not a single trace of complacency surfaced on his solemn face. For the prince, this had never been a personal war waged against Camilla or her private family, nor did he ever intend to dismantle his stepmother. His fingers brushed across the ancient wooden desk, coming to rest. Move into a resounding political victory, firmly reinforcing public trust in a future generation of leadership defined by accountability and transparency. Sitting in his study at Kensington Palace, William slowly scanned the headlines on a photograph of the late Queen Elizabeth II, smiling with deep benevolence. William understood perfectly that his actions stemmed entirely from his ultimate duty to the crown, to protect the sacred, inviolable boundary between a private family and a monarchy representing an entire nation. A family could offer tolerance and compromise, but the institution demanded absolute rigor and clarity. By rebuilding this legal firewall, William had fulfilled his promise to protect the legacy of his ancestors, ensuring the monarchy would stand firm, having her name secretly added to the attendance list for an official state ceremony like Trooping the Color. Without any special approval from the Advisory Council was a severe overstepping of bounds. To William, this was no mere administrative oversight. It was a quiet attempt to normalize the presence of the United Kingdom. The public looked at it to see those who served the nation, not an expanded private family. Laura Lopes' appearance there would send an entirely wrong message, blurring the sacred boundary between public duty and private family relationships. William's mind immediately began working with the sharpness of a man destined to rule. He understood he was standing at the crossroads of an unavoidable conflict with his stepmother. Even so, William did not rush to act on impulse. The decision to remove a name could ignite a shadow war right in the heart of the palace, especially when it touched the pride of Queen Camilla. To ensure his move was irreversible and entirely legitimate, William chose to maintain his silence before summoning an emergency meeting with royal lawyers the following day to verify and cross-reference the legality and current validity of the Elizabeth II decree. What lay ahead would be a battle of principles of the Parker Bowles family, deep into the veins of royal ritual. A wave of unease mixed with resolve rippled down the prince's spine. The balcony of Buckingham Palace had long been the ultimate symbol of the power and unity. Every time her gaze swept across the wide courtyard, where the honored guests were settling into their seats, a pang of bitterness struck her chest. Laura Lopes was in large windows of the palace. Queen Camilla stood beside King Charles III in luxurious attire, but her public smile could not conceal the immense tension etched into the corners of her eyes. His expression solemn, and his steady gaze fixed straight ahead. He executed the military review rituals with absolute precision, exuding the demeanor of a future leader firmly in control of the board, regardless of the undercurrents that had just swept through the family inner circle right before the opening hour. Behind the decisive stepson, when the most crucial moment of the ceremony struck, the royal family stepped out onto the balcony of Buckingham Palace to witness the Royal Air Force fly past. The crowd below cheered thunderously, but for the long-range lenses of entirely absent. There was no royal vehicle fetching her, no seat arranged for the Queen's daughter in the VIP section of the grandstand. Laura's total disappearance was like an invisible yet painful void, a vivid testament to the fact that Camilla's practical power had been broken at the hands of her 2 hours of cross-referencing, analyzing every clause, and reviewing legal precedents. The Chief Royal Counsel gently adjusted his glasses, offering a decisive nod of confirmation that the document remained entirely valid. The decree stood fast, silent, yet authoritative, like a loyal sentry protecting the purity of the institution. Justice of the Crown. Without a moment's hesitation, the Prince of Wales picked up a black ink pen, cold and resolute, and drew a straight line through the name Laura Lopes on the draft of the official Trooping the Color guest list. The action took place in the absolute silence of the room, yet its weight was enough to trigger a hurricane behind the palace. This confirmation acted as a key placed directly into William's hand, reinforcing his ironclad conviction that his actions were not a personal imposition, but the execution of the supreme judge. And William knew he could not afford to lose on the very first move. The next morning, the air inside the private meeting room at Buckingham Palace seemed thickened by the gravity of law and immutable royal protocol. William sat at the head of the long wooden table, his gaze locked on the original decree from the reign of the late Queen Elizabeth II that the lawyers had carefully laid out. Meanwhile, William's expression